The government's planning to introduce a bank deposit tax that will raise $4 billion over 4 years. You think it's a bad idea. Why?
Well, I have serious concerns with it. This was a Labor Party budget that they put in the budget when Labor was in government, Callum. And David Murray has made it quite clear in his report that he has concerns over it. Here's a simple situation. If you're a credit union, every cent that you lend out comes from domestic deposits. People put the money in the credit union lends it out. So they're in a situation where 100% of their deposits they'll have to pay a tax on. Whereas if you look at a big bank, one of the big four, they have what's called wholesale funding where they borrow money overseas. Of course, the credit unions don't, and the small regional banks in many respects, depending on the size of them. So the big banks would have to pay the tax on, say, 50, 60% of their deposits or their money that they lend, because around 50%, it did get up to 60%, even higher after the global financial crisis. The money that the big banks were lending was actually domestic deposits. But what happens is they have a large percentage is borrowed from overseas, the money they lend out, so they won't have to pay the levy. Whereas a small institution will have to pay the levy on everything that they have as far as their lending goes, because it's all relying on domestic deposits in their institution. So my concern is that this tax, if it does proceed, would be harmful to the small players in the financial sector, where they're going to compete against the big players. And we've already had a situation when the government guaranteed the overseas borrowings. They charged a premium, and of course the premium was higher for smaller banks and bigger banks. During the global financial crisis, the bigger banks had an edge there. So I don't want to see a situation where we have a banking system where the big end of town has a huge advantage over their competitors, the smaller banks. And that is my concern about this tax. And that's being obviously relayed to many backbenchers. We've had meetings in our office in Canberra from the small players, and they're really concerned.
The backbench seems quite angry about this proposal. There were reports that one backbencher called it political suicide.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I haven't had anyone come to me in an angry state saying that, that just expressing their anger. They've expressed their concerns. I think that might be an exaggeration, but the decision, I believe, hasn't been made on this yet, Callum, so let's see what comes out of it. But in my personal opinion is I hope we reject it, because unless we can come up with another scheme that makes it more even, where you have the banking sector on a level playing field. We don't want to have a situation where the big end of town has a distinct advantage over the smaller players. That just eliminates competition, which is not good for our economy.
Given the concerns you just expressed, would you support a Greens proposal? They're saying that this levy should only be applied to the big four banks.
Well, I'd have to have a look at details. I don't know. I haven't studied what the Greens are proposing, etc. Then you've got another situation where if the big four banks were to pay it and the smaller banks were not, you might tip the scales the other way. So I think we have to have a level playing field where smaller business can compete against bigger business as far as government taxes go. And I don't know about the Greens proposal. Perhaps worth having a look at it, but I think it'd be unfair to put on one end of one sector of the banking sector, one part of it, the big part, and not the little part. Would be, as I said, tipping the scales the other way.